This is an event for Barton College students, an opportunity year after year to rub shoulders with people who have thought deeply and led well in business. And we have had a number of distinguished speakers here over the years, and we are grateful to have Mr. Henry Rock joining us today. Let me tell you a little bit about Henry. His first career, if you will, was in media and communications. If you read his bio, there are a number of very interesting things that he did. He wrote jazz criticism on the side in the New Jersey and New York area. And when he retired, he came to Charlotte with a vision that he had tried out some in the city, in New York, and that really took root in Charlotte. And it's the vision that animates an organization that he leads called City Startup Labs. City Startup Labs, at least in my view of it, is really animated by two beliefs, two passions. The one of them is that cities grow and flourish on the basis of the entrepreneurial spirit, the innovative spirit that resides in the members of those cities. And certainly you want to look from outside the city for resources and jobs and enterprise and things like that, but at the heart of the well-being of a city is the spirit and that inspiration and the hard work of people who live there and who have a vision for how their lives and the lives of others can be better. And the second part of that vision is to understand that in the world that we live in today, social equality and economic equality relies on people who don't always get access to opportunities, having access to those opportunities. Henry will talk more about City Startups Lab, but at its heart then it is a way to help young black men who have a vision for the future of what success might mean for them and for their communities, to have the support and the encouragement and the prod to live out that vision with passion and with success in the city of Charlotte. So I could go on and on because you have animated my thinking a lot, Henry. But anyway, rather than do that, I'll just introduce to you Mr. Henry Rock.
It's a great day to be a bulldog, isn't it?
All right.
Yeah. I've got to say this. You guys are doing an amazing job here to be consistently selected as one of U.S. News and World Report and the Princeton Review's best regional colleges. So kudos to Barton. So President Searcy, Provost Daines, honored guests, Barton Stone's advocacy for the abolition of slavery, his support for the American Colonization Society aside, in some respects sets the table for what I'm about to talk about this morning. I'd like to do this address in two parts. The first part is what I call context and continuity. And I'll lay out the rationale for City Startup Labs and the work that I do. And the second part is about the work itself. But before we start, I want to set the tone a bit. City Startup Labs in Charlotte has been about the creation of a new class of entrepreneurs amongst young black men. And I do this through what I call the Center of Excellence for Entrepreneurial Competency, Innovation, and Leadership. And I know that's a mouthful. We established this center at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte last year, and it follows a 2-year pilot that we had done in collaboration with the Urban League of the Central Carolinas starting in 2014. By the way, recently we decided to expand our program to include black female millennials as well. And we're undertaking an initiative to address returning citizens or the formerly incarcerated. And there's more about that a bit later. So now, when I say young black men, what thought bubble immediately pops into your head? Be honest, okay? And I want you to hold that image and make a point of referring back to it from time to time as we go along. The premise for City Startup Labs and the Center of Excellence is that we begin with this notion that young people want to have a life of meaning, which isn't too difficult to understand because there are those of us who are still trying to find meaning in our lives, right? At least I know I am. I just turned 65 last week. Another way of saying having a life of meaning would be value fulfillment. It's a fundamental knowingness that we all possess. It's an inclination in some way or another that we're all special, right? That we yearn to enrich life in whatever way that we can, through our own uniqueness, making our mark on the world. So in places like Charlotte or right here in Wilson or Eastern North Carolina, we find unemployed youth looking for their place in the world, a place where they can have meaning. Disaffected youth with active minds, time on their hands, and technology at their fingertips can either be a recipe for disaster or the ingredients of new pathways of opportunity for determined young people. People with imagination, creativity, and innovation yearning for expression. I believe that entrepreneurship can be an effective way to channel some of this unutilized or underutilized capacity for innovation and creativity that our youth possess. Now, while it can't be the answer to the overarching issue of unemployment that all too many are likely to face, it can possibly be a very practical way of orienting key elements that most of our youth, in fact, do possess, even the disaffected ones. Again, brain power, time, and technology. This, in part, is why I call entrepreneurship 21st century workforce development. So that's the premise, value fulfillment. Now let's look at the context for City Startup Labs. And it's important to be crystal clear. In designing this effort, I had to do so with an understanding of the context that a lot of the young folk that we work with find themselves in. And it's a context for what it means to be Black in America and living in a system that has done relentless harm to people of African descent and has robbed them and us of their economic vitality. I'm not talking about the outliers. There are many examples of them who are doing very, very well. Instead, I'm referring to the vast majority of us, including some of us here in the room, who are of a people who were brought here with a tailwind and have faced a headwind ever since. So, I want to read a quote from Edward Baptiste's important work, The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism. And what I want you to do is just kind of visualize this as I read this. They sold slaves here and everywhere. I've seen droves of Negroes brought here on foot, going south to be sold. Each one of them had an old tow sack on his back with everything he's got in it. Over the hills they came in lines reaching as far as the eyes could see. They walked in double lines, chained together by the twos. They walked them here to the railroad and shipped them south like cattle. See, these people were moved from the upper South, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, where tobacco was leading crop, to the newly discovered cotton country in the deep South, clearing the land all the way. Land and cotton speculators came in droves, and slave-harvested cotton ultimately dominated the international market in the 19th century. Enslavers rapidly made cotton king, turning it into the key raw material that was the driving force for the Industrial Revolution, which we are so very proud of as a country. Think of oil today. Cotton was just as important a commodity. Baptiste goes on to say that the returns from the cotton monopoly powered the modernization of the rest of the American economy. And by the time of the Civil War, the United States had become the second nation to undergo large-scale industrialization. Pages stuck together. I have to refer to my notes. I did say I was 65. So King Cotton built New York City into a commercial and financial center, which it still remains to this day. The exchanges and trading floors that mark Wall Street saw their rise due to black bodies working the fields. For every dollar cotton made, about 40 cents ended up in New York due to insurance and shipping and financing. At the outbreak of the Civil War, the market value of slaves in the U.S., the market value of slaves, exceeded that of banks, factories, and railroads combined. You see, we need to know this context, right? And as I like to say to my students, understanding why we are where we are. Now, of course, slaves were commodified, as this ad on the left shows, looking for a large number of Negroes right next to ads for furniture and pianos and such. And maybe the broker-dealer, like the respectable John Carter Esquire, was able to meet the demand for a supply of bucks and winches. I don't know if the lot that he had was large enough, however, it was only 23 bodies. Fast forward a bit to post-slavery, and the question was, what do we do with all these Negro bucks that we no longer can extract free labor from? What's their market value now? Welcome the Black Codes, which restricted black folks' right to own property, conduct business, buy and lease land, and freely move around the country. Central to these codes were the vagrancy laws, which allowed police to sweep up black boys and men and rent them out as convict labor. Anna DuVernay's movie, The 13th, I don't know if you've seen that, but you ought to, shows just how the 13th Amendment allowed for this sort of lawful kidnapping. Following the war, convict leasing programs shifted Southern prison populations from white to predominantly black, setting the tone for what we've come to see in the 20th and 21st centuries, with our outsized prison populations made up of a lot more bucks and wenches. Context, again. Now, when we were able to find pockets of prosperity and a respite through the creation of our own communities, we were faced with riots like those in Tulsa and elsewhere. And it's important to note, folks, that the rioting during the early to mid-20th century was whites against blacks, right? Thanks in large part to the film A Birth of a Nation, which so demonized black men that it became one's duty to unleash terror on them and their families as a sacred honor. And of course, this led to one lynching after another, and one humiliation after another. Now, later on in the 20th century, exclusionary zoning and its racial covenants, redlining, steering, and urban renewal, like what took place in Charlotte's Brooklyn community. And I recommend Dr. Mindy Thompson-Fullylove's book, Root Shock, for an examination of how that policy eviscerated Black communities around the country. And even today's gentrification has had, all of this has had either the intended or unintended effect of prohibiting African Americans from owning property. And then there was the fight against integrating schools since Brown versus Board of Education, even to this day. As a matter of fact, this image is from Boston during their school desegregation battles. Imagine being lanced by an American flag. And now, according to the Institute of Policy Studies and Corporation for Enterprise Development in their report last summer, The Ever-Growing Gap, if average Black family wealth continues to grow at the same pace that it has over the last 3 decades, it would take Black families 228 years to amass the same amount of wealth that white families have today. 228 years. 17 years less than the span of slavery in this country. So, it's this context that is important as we come to terms with how young men process this in their own attempts at value fulfillment. According to Gallup and a Gallup and Healthway study, the absence of a job affects the well-being of young Black males distinctly more than their non-Black counterparts in key areas of community well-being. Gallup and Healthways define community well-being through several metrics, including liking where you live, feeling safe, and having pride in your community. Respondents are characterized as either thriving, struggling, or suffering based on their respective levels of well-being. While the percentage of people categorized as suffering jumps for all adults, the increase is extraordinary for young Black males, increasing from an already elevated 26% to over 43% when unemployed. Again, making the case for entrepreneurship as 21st century workforce development. So as you see, when we look at the arc of our history as a people in this land through to today, there has been no let up. No. As Louis Armstrong lamented in his Andy Razaf song, "Why Must I Be So Black and Blue?" Or more recently, as Kendrick Lamar's "All Right, We Gonna Be All Right." Is that a statement, or rather a question? I know this litany is very sobering. Welcome to our world. But there's a bright side, folks. There is a bright side. All right? So in spite of all of this, in spite of all of what I just laid out here, us Black folks have this rich legacy of achievement. I call it continuity. And to serve as a bridge, I'll use my own family and experience to inform what helped me to create City Startup Labs. So, great-grandmother Ella Barksdale, the woman in the middle of the upper left-hand photo, was a graduate of the first class at Spelman Seminary, underwritten by J.B. Rockefeller and named for his wife Laura. Now, the Spelmans, by the way, were also abolitionists and in fact were active in the Underground Railroad. Her husband-to-be, John Brown, was a student at the Tuskegee Institute, founded by Booker T. Washington. And unbeknownst to me, until 2002, he was also a photographer. So this image on the lower right is one that he took of the building on campus. And it's from a collection of lantern slides that I have in my possession. And note the name of the building. It's the Rockefeller again. Well, great-grandma Ella went on to become a rather noted Negro historian in New Jersey, where they relocated. And her husband was working as a Pullman porter, which was an okay gig then, but not for a college grad, but was the best he could do. Right? Now, their eldest daughter, my grandmother Marcia, after graduating from Atlanta University in 1920, went on to become the first black female chemist in New Jersey. Now, mind you, she didn't major in chemistry, but it is a testament to the quality of her liberal arts education. So Barton Bulldogs, take heed. She and the rest of the family were good friends of Paul Robeson, the actor, singer, and activist, extraordinary man. And she was also friends with W.E.B. Du Bois' daughter, and the poet County Cohen, and the activist Dorothy Height, and on and on. As we used to have a saying when I was coming up, no brag, just fact. But it's important to understand this continuity or legacy, as we must pass this on. Now, on my father's side of the family, he and his two brothers were all aviators, the eldest being a Tuskegee Airman. That's him on the left, my Uncle Preston, my father on the right. And they all became engineers as well. As a flight instructor in training in Montgomery during the bus boycott that was led by Dr. King, my father shuttled riders back and forth to work. And this went on until the base command found out and said, hey, listen, you're here for a reason. Now, you have to make the choice between being a driver or a pilot. So my father kept flying. And as you can see, I've been exposed to STEM even before it was a thing. So, raised on the heels of the civil rights movement, with a family tradition of uplifting the race, coming of age in the Black Power movement, and knowing the likes of Amiri Baraka and Nathan Wright and Ron Karenga, provided the grounding for the work of City Startup Labs. And needless to say, I was truly at home when I began working with Black-owned and operated media during the golden era, or the golden age, from the mid-70s through the 90s. Whether it was with Reagan Henry, who was a noted owner of radio and television properties, Sid Small, who ran the National Black Network and American Urban Radio Network, or John Johnson, who started Ebony and Jet magazine. These were some of the enterprising giants that I had the privilege of seeing up close as they handled their business. And when the time came, pass forward this tradition to a new class of entrepreneurs. Now, to my folks' chagrin, I chose not to complete college, which of course I would not recommend in the present company. However, my young mind was bursting with the possibilities, fueled by knowing that I was part of a continuum, a legacy, which was fashioned by the context of our struggles and the continuity of our triumphs. So all of this has led us to part 2, City Startup Labs designed for entrepreneurial education. Now this idea was first hatched in the mid-aughts, right? As a boot camp for ex-offenders, I prefer to call them returning citizens, and former gang members. And the idea was pitched to the incoming Mayor Cory Booker's administration in North New Jersey. Ended up having to shelve that idea because it really didn't get any traction at that point, and then revisited it when Mayor Michael Bloomberg from New York City had launched the Young Men's Initiative, addressing the needs of young men of color from the ages of 14 to 24. So I knew the co-chair who introduced me to the folks that were spearheading this effort, and while they loved the idea, it was outside of their core mission. And as fate would have it, I moved down here to Charlotte in the fall of 2012. I have to remember this now. Fall of 2012, to marry my beloved, who I had known in New York many years prior. And the rest, as they say, is history, right? So back to the work. There are three classes of assets that we look to build at the end of the day. First, there's human capital. Right? So when the young men complete the program, they should not only just have enterprise-ready skills, but a roadmap for how to get their financial house in order. Right? Some would call that financial literacy, but it's actually more than that. And should they choose not to start a business or launch an enterprise, their new understanding that they have gleaned from this should give them greater value and leverage as an employee. So I'll give you an idea of how this works. Taj Johnson is a perfect example of what this education can mean for a young man. He took to the rigors of the program. His personality and enthusiasm shine through, as you can see right there in that picture, right? Such that he convinced the judges of our first pitch event that he ought to be one of the winners. And it was during a portion of the program when Taj got promoted from a sales associate at an AutoZone store that he was working at to manager. And AutoZone in the Charlotte area has about 34 stores thereabouts. So in 2015, he took this store that he was working in from the bottom of the heap to number one. Number one in the district, top 10 in the country. Now, obviously, they liked his work so much, they said, Taj, hey, here's another store. See what you can do with that. And he did it again. Right? So undoubtedly, he had the promise and the guts and the guile and all of that, and otherwise he wouldn't have gotten into our program. But he attributes a great deal of his success actually to what he learned in City Startup Labs. And I spoke with the head of HR at AutoZone, and he was like, what the heck did you do? You know? As a matter of fact, I wish I had a program like this when I was starting my career. He let me know also that Taj is in the top 5% of company performers. Now, I don't expect everyone who goes through our program to have that level of success, but it really does give you an example of what can happen when we turn folks loose and let them deal with that value fulfillment that I was talking about. So Taj sees his vision playing out before him, right? He's also opened a medical supply store with his mother, who manages it, and clearly AutoZone couldn't be happier. And he can now start thinking about wealth in real terms for himself and his family, and all of this before he turned 26 years old. So, number two, we prepare the young men to build their social capital as well by creating a dynamic community that's made up of not just advisors and mentors, but advocates and evangelists and clients and customers and key partners and lenders and investors, right? And lastly, there's the financial capital, which is, in fact, the bottom line. I mean, these guys are looking to get into business, right? So it's, however, not just about them and their families, but we also want them to think about community as well. I have a saying that they will rattle off if you ask them. It's not just about the cheddar, but it's also about making things better, right? Cheddar, for those of you who don't know, is the mark. However, in many cases, this is the first time that anyone in their family has had the opportunity to think about, or even be in a position to think about generational wealth, right? Kind of going back to that context piece that we talked about. Just imagine how empowering this can be for these young men. And we want them to see themselves as a new set of role models, rather than the usual suspects of entertainers and athletes and worse. Okay? So in the Center of Excellence model, we sequence our students through a series of modules, starting with what we call cultivation. And it's here where we start this process of rebooting their thinking and their conditioning, examining what does and doesn't serve them. And again, within the context of who they are and why they are where they are. We want to set the stage for them so that this understanding that they have and that they've gleaned can be key for them and help them not only in their business but also in their lives. The second module, or preparation, is where we take it up a notch and delve into the entrepreneurial mindset. We talked about this a lot last night at the meetup. So, you say you want to be an entrepreneur, huh? What does it take? This is probably the hardest thing that you will ever do. And to do it right, what does that mean? Right? We also look at what does it mean to be a leader. Not just a leader of others, but a leader within yourself. So, they get engaged in experiential learning, which we talked about last night as well, critical thinking, human-centered design. There's a lot of teamwork that goes on, and a lot of problem solving like good entrepreneurs do. Module 3, or education, is where we get down to now the nuts and bolts of researching and planning and ultimately launching a new venture. And the education that they receive is leading edge. It's on a par with what they might get at Stanford or Columbia or MIT. And the result of that is an opportunity to participate in the pitch event. I mentioned that earlier. It's kind of our version of Shark Tank. And then move on to the final module, or the incubation portion of the program. So these first 3 modules that I mentioned, they run roughly 16 weeks and represent what we call the accelerator portion of our program. The last module, or demonstration, this includes 6 months of sponsored incubation. They have a co-working space. There's admin support that we give them, legal support, etc. And it's about taking this great idea, right, and then translating that into a viable business. At the very least, being able to bring this idea to market. At least that's how it is in theory. It doesn't always quite work out that way, right? But it's through this process that they ultimately become connected with the city's entrepreneurial ecosystem. And up until now, we've reserved 5 slots for this incubation module through the last 3 sessions that we've done. So we now have 5 businesses that are up and running, right? And this is, we've got 5 businesses that are up and running from the 2014-15 pilot, right? And we just wrapped up our last cohort, so we'll see how these guys do over the next year. Undergirding all this is a support system of mentors and coaches and counselors, and a lot of cross-pollination and peer-to-peer mentoring, right? It takes place when being with a group of guys where you have a lot of differences with it. For example, you've got an economist sitting next to somebody who just got their GED and learning from and supporting each other. It's an interesting kind of mix, and it's very important to how we do what we do. And as I mentioned earlier, we've decided to accept young black women into the fold, and there are several reasons for this pivot. It's what we call that in entrepreneurial parlance, when we make a shift. We call that a pivot. So we pivoted here. And firstly, our first reason for this is, as we examined in the context portion that I spoke of earlier, the effects of slavery and Jim Crow and segregation and today's discrimination didn't just affect black men. I mean, women have borne the brunt of this and some of the worst of these systems and continue to do so. Further, the demand by women to participate has been right there from the beginning. You know, whenever I would go out and promote the program, they were often resigned. Well, what about us? You know, where's there a seat for us at the Center of Excellence? Or where's there anything like City Startup Labs in Charlotte for us? Right? Also, one of the things I didn't mention were some of the amazing black women who were media and advertising business people in their own right that I had the benefit and the love of working with, like Barbara Proctor and Carolyn Jones, who are some, you know, if you do some research, you'll find that they were amazing advertising executives during that heyday that I was speaking of. And for every man that had a success in their business back in those days, it didn't happen without women putting their shoulder to the plow too. And lastly, we must consider the continuity from the black suffragettes like an Ida B. Wells, through to Ella Baker, who was from here in North Carolina in the Civil Rights Movement, to Kathleen Cleaver, who was a Black Panther and part of the Black Power movement, and right on up to the founders of Black Lives Matter. You see, black women have been at the vanguard since the word go. And we need them and need to embrace them, especially now when we must have all hands on deck. And with addressing returning citizens, it says that it's as if we've come full circle, in a sense, right? So I'm really excited to see what the possibilities can be with this and how this will bear fruit. So, you know, we affirm that our young people come from a long line of business builders and owners and innovators and geniuses of business success that really extend beyond the founding of the country, even before the founding of the country, I should say. It's a legacy that they're a part of and that I'm a part of. And it's both the context and the continuity that distinguishes what we do at City Startup Labs and how we do it. So in closing, I really do want to leave you with this. It's not that drink. And it's often not mentioned when speaking about business or technology or innovation and such. And that's the role that spirit plays in all of this. Spirit with capital S. I'm not talking about religion per se. Rather, it goes back to what I said in the premise, you know, when I started, and as I put it, there's this fundamental knowingness that we all possess. I believe that we need to trust in that knowingness. And trust me, North Carolina wasn't anywhere on my radar, right? But before I left New York, I had intentionally created a space where spirit could show up and occupy. I invoked, no, in fact, I demanded that spirit do its work behind the scenes on behalf of my vision. And yes, of course, you know, I had to and must continue to do my work as well. But to let spirit do what it does and trust in the knowingness that it will. So to the young folk here today, with your future stretched out beyond the horizons, right? You've got all this time, what have you, in front of you. And for those of us who are still very much young at heart, be ever mindful that even though we plant our feet firmly with each step we make. Trust in the knowingness for the course that our journey will take. I thank you very much.